Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now on the phone is the director of Next Generation TV, Tea Party favorite and former GOP congressman from Florida, Representative Allen West. And Representative West, thanks for joining us today.
Well, Kathleen, it's always a pleasure to be with you. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Well, the Obama administration wants to delay another Obamacare deadline. I'm sure you saw this in the paper or on the news today. Now it wants to delay its caps on out-of-pocket insurance costs for a year. Now, according to the Congressional Research Service, the administration has missed as many as a third of the deadlines under the Affordable Care Act. What do you make of the administration's repeated delays of the law?
Well, it is exactly what we all believe. When you create a system or, a new program out of 2,600 pages of legislation, no one really understands it. And as Nancy Pelosi once said, we have to pass the bill in order to find out what's in it, and we're finding out, and it is very unwieldy, and it is an intrusive, onerous invasion that even the Obama administration is not ready to implement. And so that's why, I believe that instead of this cherry picking that we see happening, constantly, we need to just say, hey, time out on this. Let's make sure we get it right. What are the portions of this that we can keep without, having a big disruption? If parents want to continue to keep their kids up to 26 years of age on their insurance, that's fine. But when we look at the creation of 159 new government agencies, these exchanges, all of these different aspects, the individual mandate, which people are just really dreading to have occur, and we see now once again the premiums are going to go up because you don't have that cap, which the president once said that you'll be able to keep your doctor, you'll be able to keep your insurance, and you will be able to find savings. That's not the case now.
So how do Republicans best pursue their ultimate goal of full repeal of the law? Republicans, including Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio, are threatening to allow a government shutdown until Republicans vote to defund the law. Others, like Grover Norquist, say we should delay the law by a year and wait for the backlash. Which approach do you support?
Well, I think it's very important that we say, look, we will continue to fund this government, but now let's set this thing called the Affordable Care Act off to the side, and let's make sure it's better, whether you want to delay it for a year. And really, when you're talking about a continuing resolution, you're talking about not funding it for, what, six months or maybe 12 months as part of the continuing resolution. So I think that's an important step that now we can go back and let's really do this thing how it should have been done, going back through the committees to make sure that it is working properly and we have all the eaches taken care of. Representative Tom Price from Georgia has some great free market ideas that can help to lower the cost. I mean, no one ever talked about tort reform. That should be in there. No one ever talked about how we can allow people to go across state boundaries for insurance purchasing. And let's also look at the taxing of health savings accounts and flexible spending accounts. That's something else that we should not have as part of this lowering of the health care costs. So I think we need to take a time out, as some people would say, and get this thing right. So I believe that it is a good approach. We're not, Mike Lee and others, they're not wanting to shut down the government. They want to fund the government. They want to take this thing that once again we see from this delay on the out-of-pocket costs. It's just not ready for prime time. It's not ready for implementation.
Polls show President Obama's approval numbers are at an all-time low. In a speech recently, the president blamed Washington, saying it had taken its eye off the ball. Is running against Washington a viable strategy for a president 5 years into his administration?
No, because he is Washington. I don't know if President Obama hasn't realized it, but when he looks in the mirror, he's the chief executive officer of the United States of America. So, he was the one that was supposed to come in and have policies that would promote economic growth, our energy security, our national security, and foreign policy, but most importantly, promote individual sovereignty and individual liberty. And, to try to say that, people are focused on quote-unquote phony scandals, there's nothing phony about what happened in Benghazi, where we lost an ambassador, 2 former Navy SEALs, and a State Department worker. And now a recent report is saying that there could be upwards to 400 surface-to-air missiles that went missing. doing that attack in Benghazi. So that's not a phony scandal. What the IRS is doing is not a phony scandal. That's part of a culture of intimidation that his administration has created. So, he is Washington. It's time for the president to accept responsibility and accountability. And we're 5 years into this. Our GDP is growing, barely 1 to 1.5%. Ronald Reagan had us clicking at 7 to 7.5% at this time.
Yeah, and the president recently offered Republicans a so-called grand bargain, which would lower the corporate tax rate from 35 to 28%, close some loopholes in return for supposed investments and jobs. Is this enough to turn around our dismal economy?
No, it's not enough to turn around because, unfortunately, again, the president doesn't understand. And, one of the things that I loved serving on the Small Business Committee, small businesses make about 75 to 80% of our economy here in the United States of America. So if you really want to get our economy going, the regulations that are affecting them, Obamacare that's affecting them, the Dodd-Frank that's affecting our small local community banks, which is a lifeline for our small businesses. Let's look at the income tax rate at the personal level, because small businesses, S corporations, subchapter S's, they use their personal income tax rate. That's where you want to give them some relief. So we need total tax reform. You look at capital gains taxes, dividends taxes, the death tax. All of these things need to be examined, and a lot of them need to go away so we can have economic stimulation. But then also we need to look at how do we reduce the size and the scope of the federal government. Stephen Moore yesterday had a great piece in the Wall Street Journal where we are seeing, from the sequester, a reduction in the deficit. And this is what we wanted to see happening, spending less money, capping spending up here in Washington, D.C. And so it's not about investments that emanate from Washington, D.C., where the rate of return is not that good. It's about, infusing the money back down on Main Street with the small businesses, and that's what we need to have happen.
And turning to immigration reform, the House rejected the bipartisan Senate immigration bill, as you know. What do you make of the piecemeal approach in the House, and do you share the concern of Tea Party groups who fear GOP leaders will pull a bait and switch that will ultimately allow a broad immigration bill that legalizes illegal immigrants?
Yeah, that's a big concern. When you look at, once again, I think the Senate comprehensive bill was some 1,400 pages. There's a lot of loopholes and waivers that whoever is the head of the Department of Homeland Security can get away from. The most important thing is how do we get Americans back to work before we start, wanting to grant, citizenship or a path to citizenship or a legal status to people that were here illegally. We have an unemployment situation in America that has to be, rectified. And, Ben Bernanke and continue to print money in the Fed is not going to do it. So I do agree we need to have a piecemeal approach from the House that looks at this in a step-by-step process. There's a lot of concern if it ever goes into conference committee. What could happen there could be, again, the Senate taking the high ground and the high road. So I like the approach that's going to come from Bob Goodlatte and maybe some others in the House. You talk to a person like Raul Labrador, who really has a good understanding of how this should matriculate. So I think that we got to get away from this quote unquote comprehensive, and let's do this thing in a way that the American people can understand and not have a repeat of 1986. We have to tangibly show the American people that we're serious about border security and serious about enforcing the laws of this great nation. And we can get to a point where you have a guest worker program, but we can't put the cart before the horse.
And turning to foreign affairs now, and you touched on this earlier in our interview, this report that 400 surface-to-air missiles were stolen from Libya during Benghazi. They're reportedly now in the hands of Al-Qaeda. How do you view this report?
Well, I view this as a very serious threat to the region. And our ally in Israel has to be very concerned. And there's furthermore, getting into Syria, where we already see an expansion of Al-Qaeda. I think they're calling it the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria that is starting to take hold. You don't want to see promulgation of weapons like that, because let's remember Lockerbie. It's very easy to shoot down an airliner. So Al-Qaeda has not been decimated. It is not on the run. And I know that they like to play, words with lexicon up here. This is not about the core Al-Qaeda. This is an organization that just broke out, about 500 to 600 prisoners in Iraq. They broke out prisoners in Libya, and now you have Al-Qaeda and Yemen leader talking about how he's going to seek to, free more of these militants, these radical Islamists all across the world. So we got a serious situation here that we have to contend with, and having 400 surface-to-air missiles that are unaccounted for. That's why we need to have a select committee about Benghazi, because there's something that happened there that no one wants to talk about, and two people need to come clean on it. That's the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the President of the United States of America.
And the State Department's closures of U.S. embassies across the Middle East and North Africa, does this suggest that the Obama administration's claims of al-Qaeda's retreat and demise are premature?
It's very premature. As a matter of fact, that was a campaign talking point that Benghazi definitely showed that it was not the case, and of course they tried to blame it on a video. And if Al-Qaeda and really radical Islamism were on the run, we would not have to shut down those embassies like that. So I will tell you, it's just like this. If I can use a little army organizational structure metaphor. You can destroy a division headquarters, but beneath that division headquarters, there are 3 to 4 brigades, and each one of those brigades has 3 to 4 battalions, and each one of those battalions has 4 to 5 companies. So you can say we took out the core of something, but that does not mean that that is no longer an effective organization. And I think that you see that Al-Qaeda and its manifestations, being Ansar al-Sharia or al-Nusra Front over in Iraq and in Syria, they are still just as viable and just as threatening as ever.
So is the administration's capturing of bin Laden, pulling troops out of the Middle East, and utilizing drone strikes, in your view, a viable anti-terror strategy?
No, it's not a viable anti-terrorist strategy. Osama bin Laden was one person. Osama bin Laden did not define the entire radical Islamic ideology. We're fighting against an ideology. We're not fighting against one person. And so if you don't go after the core of the ideologies, which is their thought process, what they believe in, and really it's about an information operations to erode their support, you're not going to win. And furthermore, there are many people that are looking and saying that Syria is going to be, worse than Afghanistan if these radical Islamists, backed and supported by Al-Qaeda and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, if they take root there, then you're going to have another base or sanctuary from which they can launch their operations. And even more so, they're closer to Israel. The president said we pivot away from the Middle East. You saw the Muslim Brotherhood take over in Egypt. I am very happy that the military removed the Muslim Brotherhood from Egypt, because they are a radical Islamic group. They're the grandfather of radical Islamism. So we have to be very serious, and the Middle East is just as volatile as ever.
Last question for you, Representative West, is on a separate topic. You were elected in 2010 with broad support from the Tea Party. What role do you see the Tea Party playing in 2014 and 2016 elections?
I think that the IRS scandal really has helped the Tea Party movement, the constitutional conservative grassroots movement, because previously they took pride in themselves of being, somewhat decentralized and not so much linked to any, structure or organization. Now they realize that they can be picked off and they can be attacked by, Washington, D.C. and, the forces to be, and, the IRS especially. So I think they're going to come together. They're going to be, a bit more strategic and operational in how they go about their business. So I think that you will see a resurgence. I think that you will see them play a huge part in the midterm elections and then in the presidential elections in 2016. I don't think you'll see the big mass rallies anymore, but you will see them being more so engaged in the policies and the development of the policies and legislation, and making sure that they get the type of individuals that will stand by the Constitution and promote, individual liberty, the free market system, the limited government, fiscal responsibility, and our national security.
All right, former Representative Allen West, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.